welcome Jeremy to our meeting this morning. I'm thrilled he was able to join us. We had an opportunity to connect a couple of weeks ago, and I found our conversation very interesting, so I know you all will too. The one thing I want to say is Jeremy was really excited about the opportunity to speak today, just emphasizing that community support for a project like this is really important. So with that, I'll hand it over to Jeremy.
Great. Thank you so much, Kim, and thank you all for having me. Just want to make sure, can you all hear me okay?
You sound great.
Okay, let's see if I can get my screen shared here. All right, how are we looking there? Let's see if I can go full screen. Everyone seeing that okay?
Perfect.
Okay. All right, so as Kim mentioned, I'm going to give a little overview and update of the Farmington Solar Project. I'm sure many of you have seen this in your backyard or driven past it quite often for about a year now. So, provide an update there, kind of what the objective of the project is. And then in addition to that, kind of a solar power overview. Many of you might be familiar with, the basic principles of solar, but I'm going to go into kind of how it goes from getting produced at the solar plant to being consumed by a house or a business. So gonna do a quick about me, a quick about Nextera, who is the company that I work for and the company that is developing the Farmington Solar Project. Gonna dive in, like I said, to how the facility will actually work, what the benefits are, how it impacts the community. Finally, a Farmington Solar Project overview, and then lastly, a little construction update with some pictures for you all to see. And happy to answer questions either along the way or all at the end, whatever is best for you all. So just stop me whenever you'd like. So quick about me, I grew up in South Florida, studied mechanical engineering at Clemson. So go Tigers if we have any Tigers in the audience there. I am an avid sailor and boater, which is why I love Maine. So I'm thrilled to be able to be working here. The picture to the right was actually in Casco Bay this past summer. So love the Maine coast. As I said, I work for Nextera Energy Resources in our development group. So our goal is to responsibly develop renewable energy projects throughout the country. And my role specifically is the Northeast with an emphasis on solar. So a little bit about Nextera Energy Resources. So we are headquartered in Juno Beach. We have projects spread across North America and Canada. As you can see, the map on the right here, that is where our wind, solar, and battery storage projects are located. And this map is somewhat outdated, actually. By now, the entire U.S. is pretty much green. So, fortunately, we've been building a lot of projects. And it's been a great company to work for. So with all of those projects, we are actually the largest generator of energy from the wind and sun in North America. So proud to say that. We think that not many companies, if any other company, has done more in terms of reducing carbon emissions in the U.S. And unlike many other companies, we actually invest our own money and capital to build, own, and operate our facilities. So when we, enter a community and build a project, we're here to stay. We're not getting up and leaving. So responsibly and from a community perspective, from an environmental perspective, it is critical to us to develop responsible projects. So in total, just some numbers for you real quick, we have about 22,000 megawatts of renewable energy operation. And for scale, the Farmington project is going to be 75. So imagine about 300 Farmingtons And that is what we have built, own, and operate across the United States and Canada. So thought it would be prudent to kind of hop into how a solar facility works. So as you all, I'm sure, are aware and have seen panels before, we have our panels and solar cells, which are converting sunlight into energy in the form of direct current. So if you plugged into your outlet at your house, that's going to be alternating current. The solar panels put out direct current or DC energy. So the sunlight hits this panel. There are semiconductors throughout the panel. Electrons actually get agitated by the sun, and it creates an electrical current. So in a solar project, such as the Farmington one, these panels are going to be organized in arrays. So as you can see in the bottom left here. So we have some very smart folks above my pay grade who are doing all of the math to kind of find the perfect angle to the sun, the perfect layout to optimize energy production. So the energy from all of those panels is then collected and run through what's called an inverter. So that changes the direct current energy to alternating current energy, which is what's carried on power lines and which is what is used by your home and everything in your home. So once the power goes through an inverter, that's going to be on site at the solar facility. It is then stepped up to a higher voltage. So voltage is basically kind of the magnitude of power. So it's produced at the solar plant, and then it is stepped up to be carried on transmission lines to where it needs to go. So the grid has demand wherever it might be. The solar power makes its way onto the grid, is used by the local transmission system. It is delivered to where it needs to go, kind of the general vicinity, and then it is then stepped back down, and then it is used at the consumer level. So imagine the solar is getting produced. It basically gets transformed into AC, gets carried on the transmission system, and makes its way to the consumer. Anyone have any questions on this slide? I know it's probably a little more detailed than what you've gotten in the past, but I figured it would be interesting to hear how it actually makes its way to a home or business. Right, keep going. So what are the benefits? As opposed to a fossil fuel fired power plant, solar produces zero emissions. So there is no air pollution, no water pollution, and it uses no water to generate the electricity. The energy produced is dependable and cost effective. So these assets and projects are typically contracted and operated for at least a 20 to 30 year term. So again, just going back to how important it is for us to responsibly develop these projects and have good relationships with our communities. They're here for a long time. They're offering clean and fixed cost and low cost energy to customers. So good picture here on the bottom. So as you can see, these are all of the panels here, the actual solar cells. And then this is what's called a post. And the somewhat horizontal or angled bar here is the racking system. So the way these are installed is after we kind of get our developed area, an area that we're going to be putting panels in, these ground screws or posts are put in, the racks are put in on top, and then the panels actually just kind of snap or a couple bolts right into place. So it's actually, it's quite simple. It's, minimally invasive, right, compared to building this massive power plant. Excuse me. And 30 years down the line, if this technology is no longer needed, the ground screws get removed and the land can regain its prior use. All right, so jump into Farmington. So figured I would show you all kind of an aerial, because you may not have seen anything like this before. So I'm sure you all have probably passed the construction on Farmington Falls Road. But this is basically our developed footprint. And as you can see, it's a rather interesting shape, and that is for a reason. So when we come in, environmental concerns are number one, right? So we may start with a big square area for example's sake. We're then going to come in and identify every wetland. We're going to do vernal pool surveys. We're going to survey for every other type of wildlife possible. Through all of that work, basically we put buffers in place. So if there is any wetland, we will be, say, 100 or 200 feet from it. If any, important species is identified, that area will be left alone. So through, what I'd call probably a 2-year process, a square-ish or rectangle or normally shaped set of parcels turns into kind of something like this, which is our final, safe to develop area. So jumping right in, the overall objective of this project is to provide, clean emissions-free power to Northeast customers. The demand for this specific project was driven by the state's renewable energy goals. So Maine's current renewable portfolio standards target is 80% renewable by 2030 and 100% by 2050. So it's an aggressive goal, and it's aggressive just like many other state goals are in the U.S. right now. Which is great because it means displacing, old fossil fuel generation units with zero emissions renewables. So the project, as I'm sure you all are well aware, broke ground April 2020, and we are targeting completion this September. So we're all very excited. As I stated, the project has a dedicated environmental team who aided in the development and siting of the project. And we have full-time monitors out there to kind of monitor the construction status, make sure everything is handled effectively from, a stormwater point of view while the ground is being disturbed out there. So in terms of actual customers, the project is going to provide power to utilities and actually colleges, which is pretty unique to this project, across Maine, Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. So we actually had a group of 5 colleges who wanted to procure renewable energy and the renewable energy credits that are associated with it to kind of green up their environmental footprint. That was a unique, kind of to this project item.
Jeremy?
Yep.
Would you quickly go over the colors on the map?
Sure. So they're actually not as important. They were kind of signifying different regions at the time this was made in terms of landowners, and so not totally valuable colors actually at this point. The map's somewhat outdated. So you can imagine this all just being kind of one project at this point. This was back from early stage when there's lots of logic that takes place in citing the project. We kind of had like a most desirable area, and then at the time I think the orange was potentially going to be part of the project or potentially not. There are kind of costs and hurdles associated with connecting parts of the project that might be somewhat separate. So as you can see, this parcel is a good ways away, or this set of panels. So that was what this color came from when this map was made.
Oh,
Hopefully
the
that helps.
blue is the 450 acres you're talking about?
Nope, so everything you see on this map equates to the 450
It's
acres.
450. Thank
Yep.
you.
Yep. And the actual solar arrays are about 90% of the outlines you see here. So this is kind of our boundary of development. So we're going to have basically a fence just inward of where you would see all of these colored areas, and then about 20 to 30 feet inside of that does the actual array start. And we also have access roads built in there as well. So when you see an aerial of the project, once all the panels are up, the areas will actually look smaller than what you're seeing on the map. So in terms of scale, just for reference, the project will produce enough power for approximately 15,000 homes. So it's sizable energy production. Like I said, it's about 450 acres of developed area, and it will be the largest solar energy center in the state of Maine once it is complete. And it is actually going to be taking the title from Sanford Airport Energy Center, which we just completed at the end of last year in Sanford, Maine. So what does it mean for the community? First off, there's significant added tax revenue. Over the next 30 years, the project will provide approximately $15 million in added tax dollars to the town of Farmington. So supporting schools, local programs, and infrastructure is what we aim to do with that agreement. And that agreement was set in place with the town a few years prior to breaking ground. The project represents significant infrastructure investment in the state of Maine. It's going to help meet the growing energy needs in the state. And the construction has created around 250 jobs. And like I said, is locally produced emissions-free energy, as opposed to a dependence on any foreign oil burning in fossil fuel units. So wanted to show you guys some pictures here. So these are actually from last week out here. So on the right, you've got an example of one of our access roads. So there are miles and miles of these roads, as you'd imagine, built into the site. On the left, you have the posts that just went in the ground. So after this happens, racking will be installed and the panels will be put on top. Just one note here is the ground, obviously the seasons are changing. So you're not going to have green grass growth quite yet, but once all of these panels are put in place, all of this will be seeded and basically allow for grass growth up to the bottom of the panel. So it will be a pretty lush lawn in between all of the panels. So here are a few more pictures of all of the posts going out in the field. And then the left picture here is kind of a more expansive view that shows some racking already up. Excuse me, so this does not have the panels on yet, but it has everything but the panels. So kind of shows your racking. And we're just about to start putting panels on. So I will leave it there, open to questions, and thank you all for your time this morning. Sure, please.
Yes, hi. Am I the one? Yeah, I just did a little bit of math here, and you said you're using 450 acres for 15,000 homes,
Yep.
basically. And so I figured that out, and that comes to, you'll have to trust my math because I won't go through it, but that comes out to approximately 1,300 square feet per home, right? If you reduce it down.
Sure.
And which would be equivalent to a panel that's 36 feet by 36 feet. That would be, to give roughly the same area, right?
Sure. Yep.
And that I guess it doesn't. I don't know that much about home solar, but that would be a really, really big panel for one house. And so it sounds like that this may not be as efficient. Like, is there like a lot of loss of voltage over space, or is more of the area not panels, of the 450 acres?
The latter. So that's a great observation. Number one, you're exactly correct. If you were to look at it apples to apples like that, and do that math right, that would be a massive rooftop solar system. Agreed. Yeah. So in our project, especially when we're in an area with so many environmental constraints, there is a vast amount of area that does not have panels on it. So if we were, say, in the Arizona desert, we could do 1 megawatt basically per acre and a half, right? So this project could be 100 acres out there. So it certainly seems a little less efficient, but it is just because we have so much land in the project that doesn't necessarily have panels on it. We've got swaths of road that might just be an access road between two panels with forest still on either side as part of the project. And taking all of that into account, that's what takes us to that 450 acre envelope.
And so the fact that you're closer to where the need is, that makes up for the inefficiency in the operation and the construction of it, because obviously it's less efficient the more it costs for you versus how much, because you sell by the amount of power and not by the cost of the power, right?
Sure, exactly. And to some extent that's accounted for based on regional pricing. The power up there in the Northeast is more expensive than it is for me down in Florida, right? For a variety of reasons. Just building a power plant in the Northeast, whether you're building, some traditional coal-fired power plant or one of these, is going to be more expensive than building down south. So that's kind of factored into the energy rate. We typically get a higher rate in a region like that.
So one final question then. So the more the Northeast converts to, these renewable energies, especially solar in particular, because you've got this sort of kind of a problem. Our energy rates are going to stay consistently higher, right? The more dependent we are on solar, our rates just continue to go higher, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I mean, we look at the environmental trade, it may well be well worth it, but is that going to be the case that that the rest of the country is going to end up, as things get more efficient, their rates are going to tend to flatline, whereas ours are there are certain built-in fixed costs of ours that we can't get rid of?
Sure. So I think I'll address kind of the two main points there. The first is just the cost of renewables in general. What is cool about our time right now and why we have been able to build so many projects is renewables is no longer a green initiative solely, right? The economics, when compared to simply just maintaining a coal-fired power plant, makes sense. So, 5 years ago, it might have been, more solely driven off of federal incentives, or a state like California mandating that they want, X amount of renewables. That's going to create your market, right? If you set those those that legislation in place to procure it, it's going to happen. Right now, utilities are faced with an option. They need to procure energy. They are going after solar as a cost-effective option. It is at or below the cost of its fossil fuel alternatives. So, theoretically, over time, solar, just like your flat screen TV, might have been, thousands of dollars when it first came out, and you can get one at Target now for $250. The same thing's going to happen to panel technology. So we've seen panel cost come down 20 times in the last 10 years. So it is on a downward trajectory. Our contracted power with all of our customers keeps going lower and lower. So I think the answer to the first question is actually no. Renewables are a real long-term, low-cost energy solution, and they already are at or below your utility's existing generation cost, and that's why they're buying them.
Yeah, those are great. Thanks.
Supervisor has a question.
Jeremy, I have a question really about so I have to say, when I look at all of that fields covered with solar panels and think about what happens to fields over a 20 or 30 year period in Maine, and I know that well,
Sure.
What does the maintenance of these look like? Like, how do you keep trees from growing up and keep them? You must have to mow. I don't know whether you have to mow them or how you do that.
Yep.
Or yeah.
Oats.
Sure. So we do actually mow the lawns. We take great care in making sure that basically, a lush lawn and growth space returns around the panels. I should have put a picture in here of one of our projects, but imagine the panels, the bottom of the panels at around 2 feet off the ground. We'll actually let the field grow to that height. So it'll be, in the summertime, a lush green field. When it gets too high and starts getting up towards the panels, it'll get mowed. But it will, primarily, other than having the posts in the ground, act like a, traditional grass field would. And in terms of maintenance, to answer that question, the beauty of solar, or one of the beauties, is along with no emissions, it has really zero maintenance. The only thing that affects solar energy output is if the panel's dirty, or if it was getting shade. So we design our projects to obviously not be in the shade, and the rain pretty much takes care of keeping them clean. So it is a minimally maintained technology.
Thank you.
Terry Wiesel has a question.
Yes. First of all, I had a question about the weed and grass control also, but I have seen where other solar projects where they hire people to bring in goats, and so
Yep.
it serves a dual purpose.
Yep.
Someone who owns goats gets feed, and then the grass gets taken care of, which is kind of cool. But,
Exactly. Yep.
yeah. And then my other question though is, who is buying the energy? Like CMP, or do we need to sign up with one of those, we get in the mail, sign up with us, we provide the energy kind of thing?
Sure. So CMP is one of our customers. Basically, it's a group called the Tri-State Utilities put out the request for this project. So it is CMP, United Illuminating, Narragansett Electric Company in Rhode Island, and forgive me, I don't have them all off the top of my head, but utilities spread across the Northeast, basically. So it is your local CMP procuring energy, and a large chunk of it. And then the colleges that I mentioned earlier represent the rest. So imagine you have your pie. Each contract that we have with a customer, they have an entitlement basically to the energy produced from this project. So
Great.
CMP does have a large chunk. And then in terms of, I think you probably mentioned like some type of community solar thing you might have gotten in the mail to sign up for. So that is kind of an initiative on behalf of your utility to incentivize basically the funding of projects like this. They're all structured somewhat differently, but at least here in Florida with Florida Power and Light, we actually right now our program to incentivize solar at a utility scale charges customers a little bit extra right now, and then gives them bill credits that actually have a quick payback. So it might be a similar system to what they're trying to sell up there, but just a good way for people to go solar without putting it on their roof, because you're helping to fund it. And the way it's structured, at least down here, is you actually get a payback and end up saving money over the period of time that you sign up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Dennis O'Neill has a question.
First was a comment. I noticed on the original map that you showed where you were all over the place. Florida is the home of the company, and it was not one of the green states, so that you're not building or operating in your home state.
So great observation. So our parent company, did I freeze for you all?
No, your lips are still moving.
Okay, all right. I'm frozen on my screen, so that's good.
Okay.
So Nextera Energy is our parent company. Under that, we have two companies. We have Nextera Energy Resources, which is what I work for, and we have Florida Power and Light. So Florida Power and Light is likened to your CMP. It is the state regulated utility. So that is why we don't have any, green shown in that state. FPL has their regulated region. So Energy Resources does not work in that state, but FPL does, and they do have tons of solar actually.
Okay.
We have an initiative to put 30 million solar panels in the ground by 2030. So they are actively bringing solar online.
Well, as the Sunshine State, they should be in there somewhere.
Exactly.
So the second question is, how small a project is cost effective? You talk about Farmington replacing what was the largest, so it seems bigger is better. I'm just wondering, how small a project do you folks do?
Sure. So we have a dedicated group called Distributed Generation, which does projects as small as on the rooftop of a commercial business. So it all depends on kind of utilities, pricing structures, and rates, per region. Some, if you are out in California, the energy rates might be twice as high as in Florida. So the payback on a solar system is going to be twice as fast. So the effectiveness really depends on region, but we do all sizes.
Thank you.
Sure.
Patty Cormier has a question.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for being here, Jeremy. I was wondering, is there any side-by-side comparison of the benefits of solar with respect to clearing forest land? On farmland, that's a different scenario, but when you're clearing forest land in the whole carbon neutrality equation, is there any kind of study that compares the two that you know of?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. Obviously no one wants to take trees down, and that might be a small reduction, but the solar generally is greatly overcoming, I guess, to say simply, the loss from trees. So the savings that you're getting from solar by not having a polluting coal plant typically outweigh tree removal. But in a project like this, the reason it's cited in that kind of obscure shape is we actually do the least amount of tree clearing on every one of our projects that we can. We search for existing farmlands, and out of that 450 acres, the actual trees that were cleared is a small percentage of that. So when you think of a 450 acre project, much of that, especially in this circumstance, is farmland that's already cleared getting displaced. But absolutely, that's something that's always top of mind for us. We're trying to create clean energy, and obviously we don't want to, remove forest lands in the process. So that's why we cite them in such a way that typically there is not much clearing.
Thank you.
Sure.
Chris Hollingsworth has a question.
I just wanted to, I'm going to try to expand a little bit on what Susan had asked, because like my wife and I own an apple orchard. We know what it's like to try to keep bad species and things like that out. So I guess my direct question is, does the company plan on using any kind of sprays or herbicides to keep growth or anything down from growing around the panels?
I did have to get back to you on exactly what we used, whether it is an herbicide or an organic component of some kind. That I actually don't know the specifics of. I know we do mow it on an as needed basis. I would guess that my answer is no, because we have basically environmental requirements that we're, not allowed to disturb any habitats for animals, and it's supposed to, once the panels are in, just be a field, where the existing animals can go. I understand in an apple orchard that, probably poses a significant risk to your crop, having the animals that you don't want on your site. For us, to be honest, it doesn't really matter, and it's somewhat welcomed. So herbicides, I would have to ask, but I'm happy to get you an answer on that.
Thanks.
Any other questions for Jeremy this morning? Dennis.
If I may, not the personal Jeremy, but it's kind of a nasty question. Most of you talked about the tax value, so
Sure.
that town is going to get about $500,000 a year for 30 years. That's predicated upon a value being placed upon this field. And traditionally what happens is everybody's happy, they build it, and then all of a sudden the abatements come pouring in, such as Walmart and others, to knock that value down and decrease that. The company have a policy of, or a practice of seeking abatements in later years to minimize their tax impact?
No, we do not. So any such arrangement is done upfront in our projects. That will not happen. So we put, in Farmington, this specific case, we put what's called a pilot agreement in place. So it's a payment in lieu of taxes. So, we sit down with the town. We actually go over the revenue of the project. They put a value on the project, like you said, and it is a 30-year agreement. And each dollar amount for every one of the 30-year period is specifically identified, and that's what will be paid.
So that means there's an escalator so that it will increase over the 30-year period?
It actually reduces because it's based on the asset value. So it's very
the
high
asset's wearing out and the value goes down. Oh, screwed again.
Not really, Dennis. It's still a very good deal for the town. There is depreciation,
So
as it would be with any equipment.
mhm.
It's not a straight line $500,000 a year either, because of the depreciation.
So we get more up front.
Exactly.
That's
Okay.
correct.
We get a huge amount up front.
Oh, I like huge.
Any other questions for Jeremy this morning? Well, Jeremy, on behalf, excuse me, Ann Yorks has a question.
Sure, please.
I'm sorry if I missed, if somebody already asked this question, but what is the effect of the snow cover? Your panels are only down off the ground 2 feet, and I know sometimes I've had 6 feet of snow in my yard.
Sure. So the actual snowfall, the angle of the panels are positioned so the snow will fall off. Obviously, that does not solve what you just asked, which is the clearance off of the ground. If there is a massive snowfall, we will most likely have snow, removed or relocated to another area of the site. So that would, will take a little work if there is a massive snowfall.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, I've got a
Steve
question.
Bunker has a question.
Thank you. As it relates to the visual effect of the solar arrays themselves, as
Sure.
a part of your plan, do you have, at least in those areas that are most visible to neighbors or the motoring public, like going down Route 2, do you have any plans for lack of a better word, a green buffer, if you will, trees or shrubs that might be have some effect on the visual?
Yes, we do. So we have a vegetative buffer that will be going in place once construction is complete. And just a disclosure there, the way the timing's working out on this project, the planting of those vegetative buffers may be happening next spring, just by the time, because construction isn't going to be completed until September. But yes, vegetative screening and buffers, as you mentioned, will be going in.
Good. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? I don't, okay, well, Jeremy, on behalf of Farmington Rotary, thank you so much for joining us this morning and giving us a very, very informative discussion on Farmington Solar. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for having me, and it was great to participate this morning.